Welcome to another episode of the RPC podcast here. You're actually dropping in the middle of a conversation. We were having a pretty spirited discussion about Christians, their involvement in the world. There's a lot to it, so we figured this would be a good conversation for other people to have a listen in on. Don't be surprised if this is a little bit more free-flowing. We are definitely having a pretty good conversation here. So, Patrick, you were just saying that if basically somebody were not governing their household well, do we really care, or should we be concerned about their engagement with the rest of the world, civically or otherwise? Is that a good summary of what you're saying?
Basically, it's a matter of order. I don't think, while I certainly wouldn't turn down any opportunity to reach anybody and invest something in them for the kingdom, I will say, as far as my plan and as far as how I plan on approaching those things every day, I'm not going to approach the governor and make a plan to approach the governor and try to get into his life and disciple him, for instance, if my family's a mess. If my wife is not following my lead, if my children are not discipled and walking in the Lord, at least somewhat, because, hey, everybody has free will. If my family is not accurately, to a degree that's humanly
Is anybody really contending at this point, though, that you should prioritize social change and political involvement over your family? I don't think any of us are suggesting that, right?
No, and I would even go so far as to say that my involvement here at RPC really stems from the idea that I see a bunch of Christians on the bench who aren't doing anything meaningful when it comes to affecting cultural change, because they're so concerned about trying to, and so striving and so caught up in trying to get their dicks wet with their own wives that they're married to, that I really want to help them solve that problem so they can move on to things that are frankly way more important right now. I mean, to go kind of meta here, just to bring everyone else up to speed, the West is not doing well, fam. I mean, if you look at things culturally and you look back 100, 200, 300, however many 100 years you want to look culturally, things have been in pretty staunch decline for a long time in pretty much every area other than technology and lifting people out of poverty. But when it comes to actual cultural significance and cultural meaning and people's overall, I guess, engagement with the world in any kind of God-honoring way, it's not looking good. And a lot of that has to do with this lack of concern for the civic realm that Christians seem to be caught up on. And I think that has to do in part with a lack of tools and equipment and worldview that allows them to contend with the issues that are right in front of their face, meaning themselves first. If you don't have self-mastery, you're not going to do much. If you can't then extend self-mastery into having some sort of ownership over your family life, you're still not going to do much, although there are single men out there who are doing a lot, so it's not universal. But I agree with you, John. I don't think anybody's contending that, well, my family's a mess, but I'm going to go try and affect political change.
So I just had a thought when you were talking about all that. So Jesus had his 12 core disciples. Then he had like a couple other, like 70, and then a larger crowd. So in almost a similar fashion, there's this RPC Christian crowd, Redfield Christian crowd that's 7,000 strong and growing. And there's a lot of really great content on here, but actually having content directed towards affecting cultural, like consciously, intentionally affecting cultural change, I feel like would almost be the low-hanging fruit right in front of us. What do you guys think about that?
I don't call it low-hanging fruit. I would say it's fruit, but it's a little higher up on the tree, because I see it as kind of a set of stairs. If you don't have your wife following your lead and your children growing in the Lord and at least somewhat obedient, how are you going to reach out and be an elder in your church? How are you going to reach out to your community and be the authentic, real deal? It's a process.
So, Chuck, I think we need to move past the wife and children, though. We're all assuming get your family in order first, then move out, right? Everybody's already on board with that idea. So I think we're with you. Yes, focus on your own family first. After you get your household in order, then move on to bigger and greater things, right? That's why we always talk about how, as much as people say we're a bunch of guys who are obsessed with sex when there's more important things in life, whatever, right? At the end of the day, we always try to explain, the mile markers toward a healthy, I guess, camera this way, but mile markers to get from where you are to, a godly person. Having a healthy sex life and marriage and family life and all of that is a mile marker along that way. So we're just helping people move in that direction. We point them to that saying, hey, here's a stepping stone that is important to you. We'll help you get there. And then we're going to help you keep walking beyond that. So we're already on board with get your family in order first, then keep going. Assuming that, what do you take from there?
Okay, well, I'm just going to jump in. I'm going to jump in. Sorry to cut you off here, Patrick, but I'm just going to say that one good example of this is if you knew nothing else about the Mormon Church, if you knew nothing about their theology, if you knew nothing about their politics, but you just saw the way they lived, a lot of people would clamor for that. Only because it is a stable, traditional way of life, at least as it presents on the outside, in what is becoming more and more of a storm of post-liberal modern culture. And so I think that Jesus saying, you'll know a tree by its fruit, there's something to be said about some of the fruit that churches are bearing right now that frankly is not very compelling. I mean, this is just a simple low-hanging fruit if we're going to continue on with that within the manosphere. But look at the fitness levels in most churches. Look at the healthy levels or health levels in most churches. People are kind of falling apart and people are pretty much okay with that. It's a worldview that's producing ugly slugs, and that is not a healthy worldview by any measure. And then you go on and move beyond that. I think that we have an issue in that what we are producing as disciples is a lot of people who are really into books and reading and talking and not much action.
They're stillborns in a lot of ways.
So yeah, the Mormons are doing a really good job. And I noticed that with Mormons, with Jehovah's Witnesses, they actually agree. Like they don't have all these weird different branches, offshoots of their religion. It's just like Jehovah's Witness, it's their thing. Mormon, it's their thing. Christian, you have non-denominational, Protestant, Baptist, Southern Baptist, all these.
Oh man, the Catholics are salivating right now.
Yeah, and so it's
they have just as many divisions, but anyway.
Everybody's like arguing over who has the one true doctrine. Like that's like something that's gonna have to. I think that's gonna have to be a generational thing.
Well, let me just pitch this out there though. It's more than that. Right now,
yeah, of course,
the most revolutionary thing you can be is just traditional. If you are just a dude who wants to have a family and have some kids and raise them to not be weird pervert transsexual blue hairs, you are a revolutionary that the Western governments of this world are trying to absolutely crush. Right now, the Christian church should be on like, this is our Super Bowl. This is the thing that we should be best at, is just being normal, just producing traditional ways of life. But you go to any congregation, and what I just said, I would probably like get talked to by some elder somewhere. Well, that wasn't very kind. What if they came to our congregation and you were slamming transsexual pervert blue hairs? Wouldn't they feel so bad about that? What if they don't hear the gospel of Jesus Christ and they go to hell? Whatever. And the thing is, like, Christians are so obsessed with being nice that we're not saying the truth anymore, writ large, because we're so worried about other people's sensibilities when, well, all we have to do is live relatively normal lives and defend that idea. And I think that alone would do so much when it came to the overall acceptance of the church as a political force or a civil force of any kind.
That is absolutely true. But the reason I started with family and everything is because can you jump into the public sphere and hit those upper levels if you don't move up in the church? In other words, you look at the qualifications for an elder. Is going in that direction, whether you become an official elder in the church or not, would you see that as a stepping stone to reaching some of those upper levels of the secular society? I kind of see it as a progression there, to be
Not
honest.
necessarily. I mean, looking at different spheres of what God gives us for governance, I mean, the family, the church, and the civil governance, really, I mean, this is Kuyperian theology, but it really should be three separate spheres, at least in a classical sense. So not necessarily, but what you're saying, I think, does have some merit in the idea of if we can't learn as a church collectively or as individuals how to govern ourselves well, if our elders aren't doing what they ought to be doing according to God's role, then what business do we have to talk to the rest of culture and say, hey, what you're doing isn't working? I don't think very much. But I think more to the point I was making is I don't think that becoming an elder in most churches is going to allow people to have what are considered mean views of things. If you have things that are unpopular or mean or whatever to say, people are so caught up on these feminine sensibilities that the truth itself gets muzzled. And then no wonder people walk by the church and they think that we're a bunch of hypocrites.
Okay, so going to like more of a practical level here, I think just spitballing some things that we could start doing within our realm, like specifically Red Pill Christians, is like talking about those higher level mile markers. I know that we've talked, John's done a really great job of discipling, but beyond that, I feel like there's no practical like ways of directing our power and energy towards realizing cultural change. So that's one thing. And then locally, like something I know I could do is just start a men's, a men's like night where, hey, maybe we get together and have a couple beers and we talk about some of these harder subjects and like looking at what the Bible says about like, okay, how should a man behave? How should he do this? And then continuing those little things locally, but also, continued putting out more content towards those higher mile markers. Those are just a couple of my ideas. What do you guys have?
But isn't
this
that
is the
kind of
importance of
regressing
mission, right?
towards the micro level again?
What?
Isn't that regressing somewhat towards the micro level again? Isn't that
How
like
do you,
a kind of like a backward step?
What do you mean? Like how I don't understand how.
So I think what he's saying is focusing on what you can do as an individual, isn't that regressing back toward taking micro action rather than affecting the culture writ large? And I think that the answer is yes, that is, but I don't think that we have the position as Christians, as a church, to affect the culture at large without individuals changing. We were talking before we hit record about the idea of there not being any kind of centralized, strong, robust worldview to rally around that conservatives can hold together. The left, if they have all these bonkers different worldviews that all have competing interests, but they can all galvanize around like one idea, like Orange Man bad, we hate Orange Man, everything has to drop and be secondary because Orange Man needs to go away, or whatever the issue. But like they're very defined by what they're against. And so you have Muslims working with feminists, working with Antifa, and it's just this weird coalition. And so the left can manage to make these coalitions around a central idea. Conservatives, who actually have much more in common with one another, can't rally together around a central idea because we're so quick to undercut each other on these smallest things. It's the old joke of, guys are about ready to jump off the bridge, and the other guy comes up to him and says, whoa, what are you doing? He's like, I'm not, I'm really sad. I don't have any hope in life. Well, wait, hold on. Do you believe in Jesus? Yeah, I'm a Christian. Oh, great, you're a Christian. Well, what kind of Christian? Oh, I'm a Baptist. Oh, cool. What kind of Baptist? Oh, well, I go down to the Third Baptist Street down. Oh, wait, hold on. Third Baptist, and he like throws him off the bridge because he's different, And so the point is like conservatives are really good at not working together and finding reasons not to work together. And so I think that to the point of I think there's a thought issue that's happening as well, even on top of an action issue. But the reason why actions aren't happening as a collective is because there is no guiding principle. There's no central worldview to gather around.
So that's where RP Christians comes in, or at least as I see it, that's where RP Christians comes in. So if you have this kind of ideology that's centralized that people agree on, a la RP Christians, but then you're also doing your thing locally and kind of creating these micro groups, they have something to relate to. They have something to get like, hey, this is kind of the collective, this is what we all agree on. Let's kind of bounce it off each other. And obviously, like, the Bible's going to be central to that, so they're going to be filtering it through the lens of the Bible anyways. But I feel like that's going to be a whole lot more effective than anything anybody's tried to do so far.
So let's be clear on the function of RP Christians first, right? We don't exist for the purpose of enacting political change. I know that
Right.
there's a red pill, got a group of MRAs that would call themselves the red pill, right? Different set of the red pill, not our purpose. That doesn't mean that we don't have a tie into all of this stuff. So obviously we talk a lot about mission at RPC, the importance of saying, hey, I have a goal. So if your mission is the direction of where you're going in life, what you're doing, and I would say your vision is how you see that playing out, what you can visualize about what it looks like to accomplish your mission during your lifetime. And so if we look at it that way, then if a guy can develop a clear vision for saying, hey, my mission is to make disciples and accomplish this with my life, my vision is I'm going to see that playing out by guys flowing from my life generationally who are going to do these things. When I teach people discipleship, one of the first things I say is, what is your picture of a disciple? What does it look like to you to know when somebody is a disciple now? So you've discipled him. How do you know he's ready to go off into the world? How do you know he's done meeting with you? And when you develop that clear vision for what it is that you're trying to make, that's when you have that place where you're going to get all these guys who, and as we start seeing from some of you guys, from the people on the Discord, there's a lot of this going on right now where they're developing different and individual passions in how they're expressing their mission to make disciples. And so for some people, that could very well be, hey, I'm going to go into political activism and accomplish these goals, and I'm going to make disciples within the political sphere. Like the Navigators literally has 3 different branches. It is their campus ministry, it is the military, and then they have a politics branch. That's the 3. And so somebody along the way has said, it's my mission to make disciples in the political sphere, and I want to be able to transform the world for that purpose. And so I would like to see guys, even though RPC won't exist for itself to be making political change, that doesn't mean that the guys that we're raising aren't the types of men that we want to go out making those changes.
Right. So, and I agree with that. And I think that it's important for everybody to keep in mind that politics is downstream from worldview. Worldview is ultimately how we synthesize all these different areas of thought together, and that creates our worldview. And politics comes down from that. And so when I look at RPC, I think about one of the fundamental pillars of anyone's worldview has to be, what is the role of men and women? Every political ideology, every person that has existed on this earth has some sort of worldview issue or idea of what do men and women do. And so in part, RPC, taking the red pill in general, is to reject the egalitarianism that men and women are the same. And I think this is highlighted in the church where if you were to ask, should there be women or men as elders? You're going to get a different answer depending on who you ask. Should they be involved in politics, men and women both? You're going to get a different answer depending on who you ask. You go down the line and you're going to get different answers. And so because of that, you see very different and divergent sort of worldview type of actions taking place in the political sphere. So what we do here at RPC and trying to help figure out, okay, what is it that God put us here as men to do? What is it that we are to help women understand their role to be? That is going to have political implications downstream, but those political implications downstream are a natural outflow of a worldview shift. And so I'm much more interested in figuring out those higher upstream issues, because all of that's going to flow down in a way. If it's true upstream, it's more likely that truth is going to flow downstream into how people behave politically or otherwise.
Right. So if we want to get back to Levi's original question, which is what can people do today to accomplish all this? RPC is not the answer to that, but it is one of those upstream views like you're talking about, Oz, that will lead to the downstream result of, hey, we're changing people's worldview to get them to a point where they can understand what the Bible actually says and that they can perceive the way God wants them to see the world. And so in that, I would say, when I saw something where I was dissatisfied with my own life, with the church, with small groups that I'd been leading, with friends that I had, and realized, oh goodness, people aren't teaching and understanding this, I started RPC. I built something, and God willing, it grows and continues to be giving people this new world perspective that will help them to be able to make biblical decisions. And in the same way, just as I started RPC, there are a million other things that anybody else can start. We have Our Horizon and Aquad, who had started this Discord, right? And that thing is exploding and seeing tons of fruit coming from it. And there's other people. One guy from the Discord just started r/biblical marriage, right? Which is kind of the offswing of, hey, all of you guys at Christian Dead Bedrooms or Christian Marriage, I can't remember what it's called, but whatever that subreddit is so egalitarian. He's saying, let's start a biblical marriage. And so he's going to try to get that launched pretty soon. And we're going to see guys periodically stepping up to start things. But so many people are just content with their own small little lifestyles of saying, oh, well, I just need to be a good person. And I, maybe have my weekly meeting with somebody every now and then to say that I discipled somebody. And that's what they end it with. And in reality, we need to be having bigger goals, bigger missions, and saying, look, I am not content with something small. I've often been convicted that the reason we don't see big things happening by God through our lives is that we're not thinking big and asking big of God. The bigger you ask of God, the more he will do through you. And so I would plan big, shoot for the stars. And if God shuts you down, let God be the one to say, hold on, I love that you're trying to run, but let's walk first. But at the same time, I don't want to be that we would be the ones limiting what God can do through our lives. Let God be the one to limit that through our massive ambition and trust in what he can accomplish.
Yeah, James says, you have not because you ask not. That is so true.
So something I would just say too is challenge your own presuppositions and do so strongly. The odds are the things you find in the main and most of your views just come from the mainstream, and that's just true of every one of us at default. It's the matrix for a reason. You have to take the red pill for a reason. Challenge those thoughts. Read things that are in obscure places that are being censored. They're being censored for a reason. Take it and look at your thoughts carefully. I look at, okay, there are people who have been posting on this subreddit for a long time, long enough that they should understand that a lot of what they post is absolute garbage. And we're still getting a lot of just garbage posts on these. And it's people who are trying to change their behaviors without changing their worldview. And so they still accept egalitarianism. They still accept most of these blue pill ideas, but they are really, really good at talking about behavioral change. And those two things will never work. You can't change your behavior, not truly, unless you have a different operating system driving that behavior. And so I think a lot of people will view themselves as having been red pilled on this, that, or the other issue. But the reality is they're still holding a very blue paradigm. And because of that, they're caught in this cycle of cognitive dissonance, posting garbage and not helping anyone. Because there's a post that was put out recently by Praxology about taking correction. Yeah, take some correction. It's important. Throw your idea out there, get kicked in the face with it and be told how you're wrong. That's okay. It's really good, actually. And so I think that there's a lot of people right now who think that like they're there, but then if you actually look at their lives and if they were honest with themselves, they're not. And that's okay. It's okay to not be there, but don't fool yourself and think that you are, and then go around telling other people, hey, this is how it needs to be. So I think that a lot of people would do well to either shut up and make actions, or make actions and then talk about what happened and get feedback after the fact.
There's a lot of churchianity out there rather than true biblical Christianity. That's why I push reading the Bible so much, because I know what it's done for me. I know what it's done in my life, and I know just the difference, the awesome difference it's made. More than all the other years I was a Christian and didn't read the Bible faithfully, I know what a difference it's made. And I think the scripture is key to making those changes. Now, I want to ask a question. I've been on Reddit now for almost 5.5 years. Started on the secular subs before the Christian subs were there, the RPC subs. And I know my Bible pretty well. I know red pill theory pretty well. I practice it in my own life. I've seen amazing change. I read my Bible. I've seen amazing spiritual change. I disciple people. I reach out to people. God's given me a good amount of wisdom. I'm curious, for somebody in my position, I believe right now I'm doing what I can. Maybe I'm having trouble seeing the next step. Your thoughts? What's the next step for me?
What's your mission?
My mission is to reach other people with the gospel and disciple them, help them, raise them up to become people that can disciple other people, to ultimately set up. Right now, what I see it as, it says online discipleship, because that's where the Lord has provided me the most opportunity, using a combination of biblical knowledge and wisdom and red pill knowledge to bring the application to that wisdom in today's society.
Okay, let's take this the next step. Assume that you are not just successful at your mission in life broadly, but that you are wildly and massively successful at your mission, that you are the best at that mission that anybody possibly could be. What would your life look like by the time you're on your deathbed? What will you have seen accomplished? And then I have one more follow-up question after that. So that's your vision. And that's what I would say for guys like you. You have a good mission. You're moving in the right direction. Your vision is what helps you pace how fast and quickly you can move and take strides, right? Every step when you're running a race, I was a cross-country runner when I was in high school, right? You have to be able to see to know what the course is. And the more of the course you can see, the more you can figure out how to pace yourself. You know how much, how many steps are left to take to get to the end, how many miles, how fast you need to move to keep up with the next guy. You can see how other people are progressing in the race. Your vision, the ability to see it and envision what it looks like to run that race really matters. And then the follow-up question to that is, suppose you did have a strong vision of, at the end of my life, this is what it will look like if I am wildly, massively successful at this. The next question, and I think this is where we're getting to some of what Oz is trying to say, is if you do get that massively successful accomplishment, how will that impact the world around us by virtue of the people that you have discipled? Right? And you have to make sure that you're understanding that when we're trying to disciple people, it's not just for the sake of, oh, well, I just want to make sure Bobby reads his Bible and Bobby's friend knows how to read his Bible too, right? There's going to be a lot of peripherals that start to build into all of this. And as you start to make disciples and you realize, man, I want generations and ministries flowing from my life that are, getting in the word daily and memorizing scripture, not just for their own sake, but because God put us here for a purpose. He gave us this earth. He wants us to take care of it, to raise it, tend it, and manage it. And so if we're going to do that, when we make disciples, how do the people that we disciple have an impact on the world around us? And that's the question that we're starting to ask. And so when you start wondering, okay, how do I, as a layperson, who, maybe I don't have a ton of time to be making disciples in person the way that a vocational minister might, but if you do have a mission and your mission is priority, number one, then you're going to start seeing those threads pulled together of, okay, well, this is, the bigger idea of what I'm trying to accomplish, and this is how it's going to affect the world around me.
Well, and I've seen that definitely on RPC and on the Discord. I have seen the beginnings of that, but I'll be honest, as far as vision, other than what I've currently seen, and I see it continuing, I've never really given it any larger, wider, broader thought than that up until now. And so, I'm going to need to give that some thought. So I'm glad I asked.
I think it's a good thought that everybody should be thinking about, as far as if they were to envision the world where Christ wins, what does that look like? I mean, ultimately, our mission should be aligned with Christ's mission to win the world, right? The Great Commission is effectively that. And so what does it look like, a world where Christ wins? Well, it's a world where you can work and do your vocation, which is something that God has blessed us with, in a way that can sustain your family, and you don't have to kill yourself in the process working a wage slave job. So that's going to have economic implications. It's going to be a place with beautiful art, and people are going to use their creative talents in a way that is going to be mind-bogglingly glorifying to creation, because we're sub-creators created in the image of God to continue to create. Well, if you look at most modern art these days, it's degenerate, filthy, and just frankly not honoring to God. So that has massive implications in the arts. You go down the line. I think that it would look a lot like people aren't overdosing on opioids because they're so bleak about their future, because it's been taken from them, because they don't have a country that has any kind of enforcement of borders for its own citizens. Yeah, that's going to have major political implications. And so when I think about what does it mean to have a mission, you're right, John, it has to come from a vision. You have to have a vision at the outset to be able to pace yourself along the way. And so we're assuming super long ways away from that. So to Levi's question about what do we do from that? So I have a son that just turned 1. My like number one mission right now is to impress upon him the worldview that is biblical, that is God-given, that takes into account all of these things, the arts, the economics, the theology. Now he's 1 year old. But the thing is, if I'm going to die someday and this project's not going to be done by the time I'm dead, and there's no one else who's going to be a more disciplable audience than my own family. So it starts there.
I wince a little just at the timing prioritization there. If you say that's your number one priority right now in your mission, and this might be splitting hairs on a point, but as 1 year old, he's not going to be able to understand those things you're trying to communicate. That would be a great number one priority, maybe 1, 2, 3, 5 years down the road when he's really more impressionable from a societal understanding level, right? But
yes, but I'm going to push back on your pushback here because he's 1 now. Not that I'm not going to say that he's impressionable and all these things matter now, but the kind of life that we're living and the kind of person that I am, the kind of man that I am when he is impressionable, the things that he sees me do, the things that he hears me and my wife talk about, the things that I'm involved in are all going to be impressing upon him, consciously or otherwise, what it means to be faithful. And so you're right. I'm not sitting down and having discipleship conversations about like Austrian economics. I mean, that's clearly not, he's a smart kid, but he's not there. But the point is I can't teach him what I don't know. I can't show him what I haven't seen or can access. So being able to build my own position in such a way that he can see these things and whatever siblings he may have down the road, that is part of that overall vision. It's not the extent of it, but it's probably the area that I can affect most obviously.
Well, and that's what I was going to say is the things you believe and the values you hold and the life you live ultimately is going to be planted in your children, either consciously or indirectly or even subconsciously. And if you have these things in mind, there's a better chance of planting seeds intentionally. Not only that though, but living a life where those seeds are just kind of dropped by the wayside, even unintentionally, because of the intentionality of the life you're living. I've seen that in my own life. I'm older than you. I've got a son who is 30 and I've got a son who is 18 and in the military. And for a lot of that time, I was way lacking, but I was still in Christ. Christ was faithful, even when I was not. And I've seen some great fruit from that. And I've seen some seeds that have been planted. Some have sprouted, some have not, but I've definitely seen fruit. And starting at the age that you are and at the age your child is and having that intentionality, it's definitely going to pay off, even indirectly. If you don't have, there's going to be times where you don't make a direct effort, it's still going to pay off because you have it in mind and it's going to affect the way you do everything.
No, I completely agree with that. All I was saying is that there are so many people in the church who make this mistake of saying, well, my priority right now is to disciple my children. And they use that, not to say that you were, Oz, but they use that as a cop-out to say, oh, well, that means I don't need to do anything outside the home, right? Until my children turn 18 and move on from the world, they're my only and sole focus. And so it becomes such an easy escapist from the actual need to make disciples, to share the gospel and all of that. And so I just wanted to make sure for clarity's sake that when Oz says that his first number one mission right now is to raise up his son, I agree. You definitely want to raise up your son, but the way that you train him in these things, he's not going to start receiving it until later. So the way that you focus and prepare for that long term is by having other immediate priorities outside your son, so that you can be the model that you need to be, and that he sees as you grow up that you have laid that foundation as you go. So even though your overall long-term goal might be that, the short-term, what you're doing for the next several years before he can start understanding Austrian theories of economics, is you're really doing things beyond him for the long-term purpose of reaching him.
Yep. A couple quick points of clarification. First of all, my feelings were deeply hurt by that, John. So I'm going to go cry in my safe space right after we're done recording this. So I hope you don't sleep at night because you made me feel bad. Secondly, Austrian economics, there's more to it. That is a good system of thought, but it's not a complete system of thought. So put a cork in that one. And then finally, I would say that I am a little bit of a heterodox when it comes to the RPC philosophy, when it comes to mission to begin with. So and this is in line with what a lot of other people believe too, but you don't see me posting. And if you go through my post history, I don't tend to post a lot about mission. I tend to view it a little bit differently. Time is kind of running short, so I don't really want to get into it, but I would just say that who you are and the shaping of yourself, again, back to the idea of worldview, your worldview ultimately dictates your actions. And so the formation of yourself and your worldview is, in my opinion, every man's primary mission, and every action that takes place beyond that is going to be a submission.
Okay.
Fair enough.
It's an interesting way to look at it. I didn't think about it like that.
Well, we can't do what we haven't thought, and we can't be what we haven't done.
Well, I mean, I think that more, I would say that contextualize it as one is the mission, the other is the preparation for the mission. Who do I need to be? How do I need to perceive things in order to accomplish the goal? But
see, and I think that's still even taking a very linear view of behavior. And so, again, we don't have the time to get into all of this. So if you like the thought of this, go ahead and post a comment somewhere or send a message, or otherwise make your opinion known if you want us to go spurg out into the weird weeds of different beliefs around, personality and mission and all that. So, but suffice to say, there's room for variation when it comes to red pill Christians. You'll hear it and you'll see it if you read the mods carefully and looking for some differences of opinion. That's okay. I will say that you earn the right to have a difference of opinion after you do the basics well. So for people out there who think you can just go freestyling, you can, but go ahead and keep grenading your marriage and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. There's a reason why we have endorsed contributors and those who aren't.
Mm-hmm. All right, on that note, gentlemen, shall we call it quits for the night?
Yeah, I think this has been the rambly, ranty episode. So, yeah, hopefully somebody can make some sense of it.
All right.
It's been good.
So,
yeah, the concluding thought I would leave with people is I think maybe the topic that we were trying to discuss today was, what do you do with a world where you want to make a broader social change as a Christian? All that I would encourage people toward right now is to say, figure out what your long-term vision is for how you're going to accomplish your mission, and not just within your own life, but how will that impact the world around you? And start contemplating, is that the impact that you want to leave behind when you pass away? And if not, then reframe, how am I going to go about accomplishing this? If it is, then go get it done. And think big, think really big.
All right. Good chat, gentlemen.
All right. Cheerio.